Child sacrifice is the ritualistic killing of children. In the context of ancient Mesoamerica and South America, this was performed in order to please or appease a deity or supernatural being. Other instances were simply a matter of social order, or to punish one's own tribe, in order to achieve a desired result. Obviously, this is an extreme extension of an archaic idea that, the more important the sacrifice is, the more devout the person performing it is perceived, and the greater the reward. In this video, we will explore this brutal practice in the region, starting with the Aztec culture. Pre-Columbian archaeologists have found the remains of 42 children, in the Valley of Mexico, dated to over 500 years old. In every case, the 42 children of mostly males, aged around 6, were suffering from serious cavities, abscesses or bone infections that would have been painful enough to make them cry continually. It is alleged that these remains were sacrificed to the god Tlaloc, who required the tears of the young so their tears would wet the earth. As a result, if children did not cry, the priests would sometimes pull out the children's nails before the sacrifice can even commence. The offerings were made at the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan. According to Bernardino de Sahagun, a Franciscan friar and missionary priest, human sacrifice was a fairly common activity in Tenochtitlan, and women and children were not exempt. In his accounts, the Aztecs believed that, if sacrifices were not given to Tlaloc, the rain would not come and their crops would not grow. In Xochimilco, in what is now southern Mexico, the remains of a 3 to 4-year-old boy were found. The skull was broken and the bones had an orange-yellowish cast, a translucent texture, and porous and compacted tissue. Aztecs have been known to boil down remains of some sacrificed victims to remove the flesh and place the skull in the tzompantli, a type of wooden rack or palisade, used for the public display of human skulls. Archaeologists concluded that the skull was boiled and that it cracked due to the outburst of the brain mass. Photographs of the skull have been published in specialized journals. In Bernardino de Sahagun's ethnographic research study, History of the Things of New Spain, he chronicles being appalled at the revelation that child sacrifices were approved by their own parents, the ritual occurring every first month of the year. Since the parents were fully convinced and brainwashed by the high priests, some would even participate in eating their children. The Inca sacrificed children in a ritual called Capacocha. This ceremony took place under several circumstances, such as a royal's ascension to the throne, an illness, death, or birth of a son. At other times, Capacocha ceremonies were undertaken to stop natural disasters and performed during major festivals or processions at important ceremonial sites. The rationale for this type of sacrificial rite has typically been understood as the Inca trying to ensure that humanity's best, in this case, children as young as 6 and as old as 15, were sent to join their deities. Children were selected as sacrificial victims since they were considered to be the purest of beings. Thus, the innocent chosen ones had to appear physically fit and healthy, lest their gods be insulted by imperfect offerings. Months or even years before the sacrifice pilgrimage, the children were fattened up. Their diets were those of the elite, consisting of maize and animal proteins. They were dressed in fine clothing and jewelry and escorted to Cuzco, near the Andes mountain where the emperor resided, and a feast was held in their honor. More than 100 precious ornaments were found to be buried with these children in the burial site. The Incan high priests took the children to high mountaintops for sacrifice. As the journey was extremely long and arduous, especially so for the younger, coca leaves, best known as the source of cocaine, were fed to them to aid them in their breathing so as to allow them to reach the burial site alive. Upon reaching the burial site, the children were given an intoxicating drink to minimize pain, fear, and resistance. They were then killed either by strangulation, a blow to the head, or by leaving them to lose consciousness in the extreme cold and die of exposure. Early colonial Spanish missionaries wrote about this practice, but only recently have archaeologists, such as Johann Reinhard, begun to find the bodies of these victims on Andean mountaintops. They were naturally mummified due to the freezing temperatures and dry mountain air. The first of these corpses, a female child who had died from a blow to the skull, was discovered in 1995. Other methods of sacrifice included strangulation, or simply leaving the now intoxicated children to the extreme elements of the mountaintop. 2 more ice-preserved mummies were found in 1995. a girl, age 6, and a boy, age 8. All showed signs of alcohol and coca leaves in their system, making them fall asleep, only to be frozen to death. The boy was the only one who showed signs of resistance, due to his hands and feet being tied up. It is also speculated that he might have died from suffocation, as vomit and blood were found on his clothing. In 1999, near Mount Uyellacos for Mile Summit, an Argentine and Peruvian expedition found the perfectly preserved bodies of 3 Inca children. They had been sacrificed approximately 500 years earlier. The poor victims were a 15-year-old girl, nicknamed La Doncia, meaning the maiden, a 7-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old girl, nicknamed La Niña del Rayo, the lightning girl. The latter's nickname reflects the fact that sometime during the 500 years on the summit, the preserved body was struck by lightning, partially burning it and some of the ceremonial artifacts. The 3 mummies are now exhibited in rotating fashion at the Museum of High-Altitude Archaeology. The site is especially built for them and located in Salta, Argentina. Recently, further scientific investigation revealed that some of these children were drugged with ethanol and coca leaves during the time before their deaths. The Moche of northern Peru practiced mass sacrifices of men and boys, usually war captives from distant valleys. The archaeologists found the remains of 137 children, 3 adults, along with 200 young camels between the excavation in 2014 to 2016, beneath the sands of a 15th-century site called Huanchaquito Las Llamas. This sacrifice was possibly made during the rainy season, as there was a layer of mud on top of the clean sand. In the east side of Venezuela, the Timotuquica culture left behind a lot of archaeological evidence, with a few artifacts pertaining to child sacrifice. Until colonial times, these sacrifices persisted secretly in Laguna de Orawu, now present-day Mérida. It was described by the chronicler Juan de Castellanos, who cited that cannibalistic feasts and human sacrifices were done in honor of Icaque, an Andean pre-Hispanic goddess. The Mayans believed that supernatural beings had power over their lives, and this is one reason that child sacrifice occurred. Blood was viewed as a potent source of nourishment for the Mayan deities, and the sacrifice of a living creature was a powerful blood offering. By extension, the sacrifice of human life was the ultimate offering of blood to the gods, and the most important Mayan rituals culminated in human sacrifice. Child sacrifice was done via the ritual ka'aks. It was a Mayan cultural practice involving the exchange or substitution of one thing for another. Through the ritual of ka'aks, infants would substitute community elders or leaders. They believed that the gods preferred consuming the souls of higher status adults, but since they themselves did not want to be killed, ka'aks was a convenient alternative that spared the lives of adults in exchange for children, which obviously, and unfortunately, had no say in the matter. It is also known that infant sacrifices occurred at certain times such as wars, famine or drought. The Mayans believed them to be good offerings because they have a close connection to the spirit world since they had just been born. It is also believed that parents in Mayan culture would offer their children for sacrifice, and depictions of this show that this was a very emotional time for the parents. But they would carry through because they thought the child's soul would continue existing in the realm of the gods, known as Xibalba.